Dude, this is very difficult when it's with you. It wasn't so difficult with.
That's
Okay.
because that's because like there's like what new can I tell you that I haven't already told you over time?
We've had this beautiful friendship, this beautiful relationship that we've really invested in, that we really put in the work to build. And in the process, I think there's so much wisdom that we are able to share with each other around our personal experiences. And I remember it was early in January when we were talking about this sort of personal crisis that I was dealing with. And, there was suddenly this conversation around moving on and how that seems to be so yeah, it seems to be an ordeal of sorts. And I think a lot of people our age, or I think age is irrespective, they just struggle to move on. And that doesn't necessarily have to be from romantic relationships. It could be, like you said, that you brought out a very interesting topic, that it could actually be from anywhere. It could be something that's not a good environment for you, from situations, from jobs, and all of that. So I'll let you go into it.
I was actually someone, and you know it, like we've grown up together and you've seen me over time. I think I was the kind of person who stuck on for too long. Like I would just
Hmm.
I had a version of what was right for me, and I had a version of what was good for me, not just in relationships, like we were saying, like, oh, this is what's good for me. And I just stuck on to that and like kept working on it when it was not serving me. So I actually learned it, I think, the hard way.
Hmm.
I've not been very good at it. Growing up, I wasn't very good at it. I was known to stay in like really, really long relationships, which everybody around me had moved on from that relationship and knew that it was not going to last. But I would stick it out and like try to make it work. And I'm just like, it was so unnecessary. Even with like things I liked to do, like I had just gotten over certain things, but I kept doing it because it was a part of my identity. So I don't know. I don't know when I
Right.
realized the value of it. Maybe I don't know. Like I think it was much later in life when I was just like, there's really no point when something's not serving you. Like you grow. It does not mean you
Hmm.
gave up or you failed. Like I think that's what I was thinking about
Right.
initially. That if you move on, that means that you tried
Right.
and you
Yeah.
failed. You didn't get the first prize, and so that's
Yeah.
that's what I was focusing on, like getting the first
Yeah.
prize. But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, took time, took time. I don't know. I think you tell me, like we grew up in the same kind of environment. It wasn't really moving on, wasn't really romanticized at all. It was like failing, right? Like I don't know, what do you think about it? Like I thought it was like failing if
I,
you had to move on from something.
I I think for me, the way I'm looking at it today is in a way, it's in a very profound sense. Personally, for me, I think now it has become more around my personal goals and ambitions. You don't have to stay stuck in a place if it's not fulfilling you. So, and
Yeah.
that could be far more than just relationships. That could be friendships. That could be careers. That could be goals and aspirations. And, just sort of looking at it in a different perspective has helped me so much in my, I would say, professional journey, in my personal goals and ambitions. Like, I was raving about this particular list that I wanted to make it to. And at some point I was like, hypothetically, let's assume that we're there. And then what? And I
Yeah.
think at that point, I realized that, grow up. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, even if you make it, doesn't matter. If you don't make it, doesn't matter. Nobody else apart from you gives a rat's ass. This is something I would want to adopt in many different areas of my life. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think when I was it's so funny. This is like a very funny thing that I realized back, I think in 11th or 12th grade. As a child, I used to do a lot of dance, right? Like I used to dance a lot, like I
Mm.
learned
Mm-hmm.
classical dancing and stuff like that. And like, okay, like maybe that became such a big part of my identity. I was like, that's something that will get me into like a good school and things like that.
Right.
I wasn't very good at it. Like, in all fairness, I wasn't very good at it. And like, I was so stuck on that skill. I was like, this is going to be
Mm.
my ticket, to do well in life and
Right.
things like that. Not realizing that I was getting into speaking and debating and arguing my
Mm.
point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was something I was developing without even knowing it. Because my
Mm.
goalpost was dance. Like, I was like, I'm going to get this degree in dance, and that's going to get me into like undergrad. And like
Right.
very late, like I think it was in 2014 when I went into like these auditions in Delhi
Mm.
University. I didn't make it to any of the dance auditions. And I was just like, oh
Mm-hmm.
shit, like I thought I was good at this. Like, why the hell have I not made it to anything? And I
Right.
made it to so many debating auditions. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do dance thing anymore. And my mom was so upset. Like, my dance
Mm.
teacher, who I really admire, she's like a second parent to me. She was also like, oh, but you should continue. And then I gave up. I have not danced since 2014 at all. And I was just like, no, yeah, that's not
Mm.
serving my purpose anymore. Like, I like to speak, I like to debate. That's
Mm-hmm.
something I want to do. And I don't know if this is what I would have been doing if I kept sticking on to that and being like, no, this is my be all and end all. So goals change, like
Mm.
when you grow up, goals change, and like it's not failing if you move on from a goal
Right.
and you find a new purpose for yourself. Like it's just over time you realize that that's important to grow as a
Right.
person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's also this familiarity, the sense of comfort in, say, a certain goals, or, like, for example, dance for you, or being in a certain place, or a job for you, or in a relationship with you, or in a friendship. You get what I mean, right? There's this sort of comfort, there's a sort of safety, security, and at times that's very difficult to move on from. Like, sometimes it could be a very comfortable salary, and I
Yeah.
think that is something you in your professional career have also, when you were at D Show, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a decision, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've never really been in that place where I had to, uh, because actually for me, everybody sort of around me told me that once you get into a job and once you start making money, it's going to be difficult to leave that. And, like, it's
Yeah.
going to be, so what was it like for you?
Yeah. It was so funny because, like, that's exactly what I was told. And, I was told that if you go into a well paying job, there is no way
Mm.
you're getting a graduate degree. Nobody, like, once the money starts coming in, you'll get
Right, right,
complacent
right.
and things like that, and you won't enjoy it. You won't challenge yourself to go and do another degree and go into that ambiguity
Mm-hmm.
of not having a job again. You won't do it. And quite honestly, the first 2 months in my job was so well paying. I was like, oh my God, this is great. Like, I can go to the gym, I can go work. It's like so luxurious. Like, it's like, and I was in Hyderabad, which is not a very expensive city to live in because it's not like the
Right.
biggest metropolitan city. So I could afford anything I wanted. And I was just like, this is
Mm.
great. But, like, is it fulfilling you? Like, it wasn't fulfilling me.
Mm.
My biggest thing was, like, I was so interested in studying gender, and and there was nothing. And you when you become so, it becomes a habit. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you go to work, you go to the gym, you come back. It's like that cycle. It's just the routine. It's like
Yeah.
you do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I was just like, this is not what I want to do. Like, will I be
Mm.
okay doing this for the rest of my life? No.
Mm.
So let's try. I didn't even like, it was not like, oh, one morning I woke up and I was like, no, this is not serving me, and I
Right.
went and quit
Mm.
my job. No, I'm so risk averse. And that's something
Mhm.
people that holds people back from moving on too, because moving
Mm.
on and changing your goalpost is risky. And I'm a
Right.
really risk averse person. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to apply. If I get
Mm.
through, then I'll quit my job. I'm going to
So you're
put
kind
in
of leaving it to
extra
fate.
hours. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to do extra hours. I would work 9 to 5,
Mm.
9 to 9 sometimes, because like people work schedules in India are all over the place. I would come back and I would work, like apply 3, 4 hours more to like grad schools and scholarships and stuff like that. And when I got in was the day I quit. And so I had
Mm.
to serve my 2 months notice period and then move to London. So it was, I, I was very scared. I was far more fearless in London because I had done it once. So once you let
Yeah.
yourself go and do it and
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
that risk and move on,
Mm.
then it gives you
Right.
like this freedom of,
Yeah.
oh, I can do it. I did it once, I can do it again, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've touched on in, I think, one of my very first episodes, that it's just that first 5% of doing something that's uncomfortable, because once you've done it, you already get into that momentum of sorts, and
Yeah.
you're already used to doing something that you thought you couldn't do, and then from there on, I think it gets easier and easier. I wouldn't say, I don't think easier is the right word, but it does get you're just used to taking challenging yourselves in a certain way. So
And
yeah,
risk
I think
doesn't seem as daunting. I think it otherwise
yeah.
risk feels like, if I do this and then I don't get a job and then I'll have to depend on everybody in my family. I'm 24 years old, da 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 da.
Mm,
Who cares,
mm.
man? Like, who cares? Once you do it and you take the risk, you're like, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I did it once. Worst case, I'll be
yeah,
jobless for 4 months. That's the worst that can
yeah,
happen, right? Like, it comes with a
yeah,
certain amount of privilege to say, worst case, I'll be
yeah.
jobless for 4 months. But even then, there are so many avenues to make your money and make,
Mm.
like, at least
A
enough
living.
to sustain yourself, not live a luxurious
Mm,
life. But if you do
mm,
it once and you push yourself once, that risk feels less of like a big monster or something like that.
mm.
Yeah.
Do you think there would have been any point in life or any point in your journey where you had to move on, say, sort of unwillingly? And that could be in any sphere.
Hmm.
That,
Hmm. Oh, wow.
mm.
I don't know. I'm a leech. I just speak and I suck the blood out of the other thing or the other person. I don't move on till I want to move on. But, and this is not like, I'm not trying to like say it in a way that's sad or anything in any way. It's just life happens,
Mm,
right? Like, so
mm,
when I was very young, like I in high school, back
mm,
in high school, I think I wasn't ready uh, to move on in terms of my family. Like my parents split up, and
mm,
I
mm.
wasn't ready for that. Like I wasn't ready to
Mm.
move into a completely new home. I had grown up in
Right.
this one home with my father and my mom. And
Mm,
then I had to
mm,
just move into a completely new home. In a
mm.
completely new area where I had never lived. It's a rented apartment. I had always lived in a home
Right.
that was mine because it my parents owned
Mm,
it. And now I'm moving into a rented
right.
apartment. I wasn't ready for that. Like I wasn't ready
Mm,
to let go of my ties because I've never had a home since then because my mom kept moving after that. Like she kept shifting
right.
home. So I don't have a home base really.
Mm,
Um
mm,
but it's literally like I wasn't ready to move to a new home
mm,
at all, like, and it was also, it just did not mean moving physical space. It was also moving on from the luxury of having both
right.
your parents, the luxury
Mm,
of knowing that you have a family, even if no matter how dysfunctional, it was moving on from a
Mm.
lot of security to like a lot of insecurity. And I remember when we moved in, and that's like a very funny story, and I think that I it'll like go down in history. I moved in, it's like almost poetic. We didn't have a lock,
Mm.
and we didn't even have a lock to like lock the door when we went grocery shopping. So the first time we moved in, we just put all the stuff in my house, and we didn't have a lock. So I looked at my mom and I said, how are we going to go, like, because like my older house had locks within the door, and this house needed to have a physical lock because it had like a
Right,
thing which didn't have a lock in the
right,
door.
right.
And I was like, what are we going to do, like? And my mom looked at me and she said, I don't know. She was as out of whack as I was. She had no idea what she was doing. And I
Mm.
called a friend who wasn't even my friend. Actually, he was your friend. I met him through you.
Mm.
I called Siddharth Sheshadri, who is not even my friend. I
Yeah.
didn't even know him very well, but I knew he lived close by. And I said, hey, do you have a lock
Yeah.
and a key by chance, like to lend me for my house?
Oh, great.
And he was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll walk and come. And so he came walking with a lock. We were waiting
Oh,
outside, and I borrowed my first lock in my house, was a lock at his house. So,
good old
like,
said.
yeah. And it was like, in my mind, like, now that I think about it, that gave me the thing ki, okay, maybe I don't have a lot of security and things where this was a forced move for me
Mm.
mentally, but I have people who'll take care of me. Like, I'll
Absolutely.
find them. I'll find them in friends. I'll find them in a chosen family. It's okay. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all
Yeah.
that bad. And so that is probably something that I where I moved on without like wanting to move on.
Right. Right. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. The kind of spin you put to it, because I would have never sort of expected that kind of an answer that,
Yeah.
and I think it's also so metaphorical in a certain sense that, like you hesitate to move on from a certain situation only to discover better pastures. And that could be in form of a new career, in form of something that's better for you, something that's, you know, you didn't even expect for it to be like that, and it is, and it is. And I think it's also a lot of moving on from your identity that was associated with, like, to be the brown kid, or to be like, the kid from a broken family or from a perfect family, or whatever else that it was. And I know you, and you've had like a really challenging adolescence, really challenging childhood. So in a
Yeah.
certain sense, you seem like the perfect person to speak to about when it comes to this sort of a topic, because like, yeah, I just want to play outside the conventional terms of what moving on means and what it could mean, for people, and just throw a different sort of light.
But like I'm curious, like, because you spoke about how tough that time was. From the outside, you see certain people and you see that, oh, they are the perfect people. Like they're like the rule breakers, like rule
Mm,
breakers, change makers. They're the ones who, like, they have no fear. And you kind of came across like that throughout our childhood.
mm,
Like, I feel like not just me, like anybody who lived there knew you, felt like you were kind
mm,
of a your own path kind of person. You didn't follow conventions very much.
yeah.
But was there something that you felt like you didn't, that you struggled to move on from, like in life, even back in the day? Because externally it looked like you would just snap your finger and move on in no time, because you were just so, like Sufia, like you were in your own zone and things like that. I don't know.
Do, but like that's the thing. I think I don't even have to think deeply to answer that question, because it wasn't a facade. And for the people who've known me closely, know that, like what I'm here, that I'm literally what I am, or what you see on the surface. So I don't think, like, if for me it is like this, and it is by choice that I don't snap my finger.
Yeah.
So, I think that is also something people who are really close to me understand that, okay, when shits hit the roof, shits hit the roof. And sometimes it can be, far longer depending on the situations. And especially with things that did not matter to me as much. Like, I used to get into a lot of trouble. And for me, I just sort of moved on from that also. Like, because for me, I was like, this is not even worth my time. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, and right now I look at it like that with this vocabulary, but then back then as a kid also, I think, at some level, this is what my thought process was. But that was that, okay, yeah, fine, punished, okay, yeah, kicked out of school, so what? Like, fuck off, like, let's do the next thing. I think I was always in the zone of having fun.
Yeah.
So the moment when I stop having fun is when I'm like, too much work, or like it's not fun anymore. So I'm like, yeah, let's go find something else that's entertaining me or is interesting for me. So I don't
Yeah.
think I've really struggled. And in my romantic relationships, it's very different because I think that is where I am very, like, I think I would say I'm fairly attached, and that's also with friendships, and that's a very conscious sort of attachment.
Yeah.
Like, if I want, I can, because there are people in my life that I've cut off so cleanly that they don't even know that they're not a part of, my inner circle anymore. But they won't understand, because obviously I'll still be nice to you and I know how to behave, in a social setting and all of that. Back in the day, maybe I didn't, and I wouldn't have the patience and tolerance for that. But now I'm like, yes, I recognize that you're equally human, and whatever went down was because whatever went down. And okay, yeah, you're on your own journey. And yet I have that thing that I have moved on from that friendship, and I have moved on from whatever resentment. I've really moved on from the possibility of us being tight.
Yeah.
Like, maybe
Yeah.
right now is not the time and space. There could be, if it comes
Yeah.
back, then yeah. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I
No,
think.
it's interesting. It's very interesting because I feel like, and you said it so nicely, like there's like no resentment. You're just like
Mm,
clean. You keep it clean. Um,
yeah.
it's so sometimes the what keeps me, at least kept me from moving on, was like I thought what I was doing was the end game, was final
Mm,
in my
mm,
career or in a friendship. Like this is the strongest friendship. Like I can't give up on this
mm,
friendship. Like I'll keep
right,
putting
right.
in effort in this friendship because this is end game. Like we became friends when we were in high
Right.
school, like, or in elementary school. We are like so tight. I can't give up on this friendship. And
Mm,
I'm like,
mm,
even with relationships, you're just like, no, 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 we're high school sweethearts, we'll get married. you
mm.
you project something that does not exist because you want it so badly to exist that
Yeah.
you keep putting in effort when
Mm,
it's giving you back nothing. And I think that
right. Yeah.
that that's that realization, that self awareness that you had very early on, I think I developed over time. I was like, no, this is
Yeah,
not giving
definitely.
me anything. It's
Mm,
better to be clean and draw a line
mm,
and say, I respect you, I love you. If you need help, I'm here. But
yeah.
I'm not going to invest more in this. Like I'm going to move on and
Mm,
do my thing because something that
right.
serves me. And I'm not just going to keep
Yeah.
giving when the
Mm,
whole
mm, mm.
situation is not serving me. Yeah.
And like, just for the sake of a very open and honest conversation, our friendship was like that. Like, for a good couple of years, for I don't know, 2, 3 years, we were like that. Like, we were, at least I was super cordial. And back then, obviously, you call it self-awareness, and that's very kind of you. But back then, I didn't know it's self-awareness. Like, it was just what felt natural to me in a certain sense, that okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this, I don't want this to be my headache anymore, because the more, like, it is still a sort of investment when you're not moving on from a
Yeah.
certain situation.
Yeah.
Like I was like, and this is something that you keep bringing up, that, like the last day of school or wherever, when I came up to you, and when I think about it, I probably just did that because I was like, I don't want that negativity in my life. And, like,
Yeah.
I wish you well. I want you to wish me well. If you don't, just stay neutral. But no, I don't want drama. And yeah, I would just consciously do that with everyone. I think everyone, even friendships. Like, and that's exactly what I mean, that doing it so cleanly that you're not sort of making the other person feel like, they did something wrong. And, like, it's okay. We're all trying not to hurt ourselves in a certain way. Like,
Yeah.
we're all trying to protect ourselves, and that might end up hurting somebody else. But I don't think that's ever done intentionally, at least when you don't have that intention. And
Yeah.
yeah, so,
And you, when I say this, and I say this in the nicest possible way, sometimes moving on cleanly is actually that sometimes moving on cleanly is actually what makes it possible to come back with a fresh start.
yeah.
If you continue to stay for
Mm,
too long, it just defeats the whole purpose. The fact that you talk about, that we weren't friends, we took a clean break, you were living your
mm,
life, I was living my life,
mm,
and then on last day of school we were like, you came to me, you said, I think you said, or and in Hindi, I don't know how the translation is not as poetic as it is in Hindi, but the translation almost roughly translate is like, what happened happened, like, it's okay, let's move on, it's okay, it what happened,
yeah.
all all hurt and pain is forgiven. You said gile shikwe
Mm.
maaf, and it which means like all hurt, all pain, all
Did I
misunderstandings.
say that? So fucking
Yeah,
cheesy.
yeah. And I
So
was like,
fucking cheesy.
yeah, and I was just like, oh wow, like, and so, and
Mm,
that's why what happened when we became friends again in, I think I was
mm,
in London when we actually became like close friends
mm.
again. That was
Right,
possible
yeah.
because both of us started from a completely new book, like, let alone like
Mm,
chapter, it was a completely new book. We closed a book,
yeah,
we were like, okay, this book
yeah.
is over, we'll
Just
start
move
with
on.
another book.
Yeah.
Characters remain the same, but you develop them
Yeah,
completely differently now, because
yeah.
we're completely different people, and the acknowledgement that you are very different from who you were, and I'm very different from who I am
Mm,
and who I was, and let's
mm,
get to know
mm.
each other from scratch. And that is just
Exactly.
possible because you let go. Unless you let
Mm,
go, that malice just remains. So you really need
mm,
to let
mm,
go of careers. People come back to their careers after so long.
mm.
um,
Yeah.
People come back to their friends after so long, come back to their relationships after so long.
Mm.
Unless you move on and let go cleanly, it just is not possible. It's not possible to come back
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it sort of reminds me of the proverb that, like rolling stone gathers no moss. So there's so much metaphor, there's so much beauty in the English language also, that, there are these very simple learnings that we've known since childhood. Like, it is a part of what we've learned of our education and everything else. And in a certain sense, we're like, okay, yeah, this applies here also. This is exactly what it means. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't keep moving forward, then how are you experiencing new things? How are you growing as a person? And especially, like, for me, in the last 2 months, the journey has been so fucking crazy. And I'm having fun. Like, I haven't had this kind of fun in my professional career for the longest time.
Yeah.
And the honesty of it is that I still don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. And somewhere it doesn't matter, because, like, I just feel like I've moved on from that idea also. That, like, work has to mean this. And and it's sort of working out, like there's, something from the past that's coming up in terms of like, unpaid invoices. And yesterday I was checking my investing accounts and I was like, you know what, I can chill a little bit. Right now is the time, because it's not like I'm in no bad situation, I'm in no worse situation. And it was just the idea of even moving on from failure in a certain sense. Okay, because I started my company, that failed, that didn't go on. So moving on from that without sort of dwelling into it, without staying there too long, that, without letting it hurt. I was very quick to identify also that, it's time to do something else, and this is definitely not going to work out in this moment in time. And
Yes.
yeah, that just led to something else happening, which was honestly never a part of the plan, at least this early. So,
And I think that one thing that um, when you said about failing, right? Like sometimes um, when people say when you fail, you don't get what you want to get. You've put in all your heart and soul and might into that. People
mm,
say, "Hey, don't dwell on it too much. Just go do the next thing." And sometimes, like just to give you like what I feel like, there is a healthy amount of dwelling that you need to do. Like
mm,
there's a it's a curve. You For you to move on well, you need to have dwelled on your past mistake a little bit, and
mm,
and then that moving on is more productive. Because if you just keep, okay, this didn't work out, next thing, this didn't work out, next thing, no, there needs to be a purpose why you move
mm,
on. Like I wasn't enjoying my job,
right.
and so I wasn't like, I'm not enjoying this, quit it, I'll do the next thing.
Mm,
What was that next thing? I gave myself that time to like be, okay, why am I not enjoying this?
mm,
What do I actually like to do? What do I
mm,
enjoy? Quite honestly, like I'll tell you something very funny. A lot of people, when I speak about applying to programs abroad, and everybody knows it's very expensive to study abroad. Like
mm,
you've
mm,
studied
mm,
abroad, I've studied abroad. It's so expensive for like South Asian countries, people from South Asian countries to move to the West, because of how
right.
the economics of it is. Like our currencies are far more devalued than currencies of Europe or the
Mm,
US. And so when I was deciding to go do my masters at in the UK, I applied to a whole bunch of schools in the US and the UK. But I dwelled on what would I like to do next
right.
when I
Right.
was working. And I was like, you know what? I would love to teach.
Mm,
And that's like something like I really enjoy. I enjoy
mm,
teaching, talking to students,
mm,
mentoring, because I did it in undergrad, and I was like, this is something I like. So what's the next
mm,
step to do? Like if I want to teach, I need a PhD. There's no way I can't teach school
right.
kids. Like that's
Mm,
I
mm,
can't
mm,
teach
mm,
kids who are below a certain age. Like I won't be able to deal with them. So I need to do a PhD. That amount of dwelling on the fact that I wasted a year. That job really gave me not much in my
mm,
academic journey. But that gave me the realization that, oh, I actually like to teach. And so I want to
mm,
do a PhD. And so I can't take a huge loan in my
mm.
master's, because that will deter me from going and doing a
From
PhD,
good.
because I'll have the
Right.
loan to repay. So I was
Right.
like, okay, then scholarships take the front run. Like I have to
Mm,
literally look for scholarships, every scholarship under the sun, and apply.
mm,
So I
mm.
applied to so many scholarships and I got only one, which covered me fully. Only one. But that
Mm,
dwelling on the present made me
right.
realize that how I had to move on in the future. If I was just like, okay, I want to do a master's, I would have taken a loan and gone into a
Mm,
master's. And then in the master's, when I
yeah.
would have realized I want to go to do a PhD, it would have deterred me because I would have a
Mm,
loan to
mm,
pay off. And PhD is
mm,
another degree, which means that it doesn't pay you so much that you can pay your loan and pay your bills.
mm.
So there
Absolutely.
is a healthy amount of dwelling, which helps you to
Mm,
plan for the future, which I think is
right.
very important, when especially when you're moving on as an immigrant. as an immigrant, when you're deciding between jobs, between stints, between relationships,
Countries, cities.
countries, like it's important to think a little bit, like dwell a little bit on why this did not work
Yeah,
out and why you're moving on
yeah,
from it.
no,
Because you're alone,
absolutely.
right? Like
Like,
you and I, we know we
mm,
live alone.
mm,
There is not that much of a familial kind of support system. You have
mm,
friends who have their own
mm,
lives, so you don't want to keep
absolutely.
making choices that hurt you. So a
Mm,
healthy amount
mm,
of dwelling is important so that you do the right thing for yourself. No, if not the next time, the time after that. But you learned something
right.
in both those leaps, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when somebody else asks me, like for example, Stavia, she wants to go abroad, and she's in that phase of her life where she's planning forward, and uh I ask her these questions where, like, and obviously there's this elder sibling syndrome that sort of is at play where you're overprotective, and it's so interesting that the whole uh, Western culture of getting into debt and all of that to fund your education. And I literally recorded an episode on this morning that our relationship with education is so transactional. Like, you're studying to get something, to get a return on invest. Fucking go buy gold if you want return on
Yeah.
investment. Go buy property. That is what ROI is. Education, learning is not something that, like it is. I find that so commodified. I find that such a capitalist ideology also. And it's a very general sort of ideology amongst our peer group that, like, okay, I'll take up a loan because I think this is the next step that will get me money, or, like this is something that will help me sort of elevate my career. And I just sat her down and I'm like, sit down, let me explain economics to you, because like the way the world works, you do not need a degree to earn money.
Yeah.
You look at the millionaires, billionaires of the world, even if they are like, even if it's somebody who is running like the biggest company that you can name of, they dropped out. From my personal journey, like whatever I've done in terms of work, everything is self-learned. And
Yes.
even the last degree that I got the degree just for the heck of it, and that was for my imposter syndrome. That okay, yeah, I'm doing this for clients, but like nobody gives a rat's ass to it. It's like, I have my graduation next month. For me, in my head, I'm just like, yeah, another degree to wipe my ass with. And
Yeah.
nobody's looking at that. And like the topic that I'm talking about, I'm not going to any kind of university. It's taking a lot of effort to read up on this, to research on all of this, to whatever, like to make sense of what I'm saying before anybody else, to my own self. And that's what I sort of encourage anybody who's, like thinking of, say, switching careers, or okay, the next phase. I'm like, great, next phase, what are you interested in? For example, I was giving the reference of my sister. She has that clarity that, okay, yeah, I do want to study psychology for that, for example. And okay, now you've streamlined. Now what? Okay, next. If you want to actually practice, is that what you want to do, or you just want to study because you're interested? The best part of going abroad was not the university, it was the
Yeah.
experience that I got. You
No,
know,
I agree. 100%. 100%. I think, like it's very hypocritical if I if I say uh, degrees are, because I've been in school
mm,
since 2000. That's when I entered Sacred
mm,
Heart Convent as a kindergartner.
mm,
I have
mm,
only not been in school for 1 year between 2000 and 2023. I have been in school throughout. I did like
mm,
elementary, middle school, high school. I did undergrad, then worked for a year, grad school, and now my PhD. So I've literally been in institutions. But the ambition was never to get a degree. The
mm.
ambition was
Yeah.
always to do what I like.
Mm,
And that's
yeah.
why, like, there are these questions about, but do you have any real work experience? Like, what is your work experience? Work experience to kuch nahi hai. Aunties will say, like, work experience,
Mm,
she doesn't have very much. But the fact is,
Mm.
I'm getting paid to do what I love. I love to
Absolutely, yeah.
research and like talk to people, and I like see what how people are impacted in different ways,
Mm.
and how women are impacted, how people from first generation are impacted. That's something that I love to do. I'm getting paid to do
Mm.
research, and
Mm.
that's great. I don't give a damn about the degree. I'm getting paid to read and write about something that I love. What's a better
Yeah.
job than this? Like, that's how I see education. Like, I,
Mm.
especially when you're paying for it, it makes it a lot about that, what you said, commodification
Mm.
of, okay, I'm paying this much, my job will be
Exactly.
for this amount, so then I will
Mm.
be able
Mm.
to pay this loan in these many years. And your brain just works like tuck 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 mathematics. And coming from South Asian cultures, it's also the only way you've been taught to think about
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
um 12th, you need to get good grades. Why do I need to get good grades? Because undergrad, you will not get into a good school otherwise. Okay, undergrad, you need to do all these extracurriculars, you need to get good grades. Why? Because grad school applications, your letters of like your statements of purpose and letters of recommendation need to be holistic.
Mm.
But really, like, it's so, and it's probably this like race mindset, and that also
Yeah.
one needs to move on from. Because I've
Mm.
realized much, like, I was that race
Mm.
mindset. Like, if I don't run, somebody's going to step on me and run, right? Like,
Right.
and that you have to move on from, because that's not sustainable. Life is not a sprint.
Mm.
You're not
Mm.
constantly competing with other people. Like, you have to come to terms with the fact that you have to just sit and learn to live with yourself. So
Mm.
even if it is paying you very little, are you loving what you're doing? Like,
Yep.
uh, it might pay you a lot. Like, literally, I was just telling my brother the other day, it's paying me so much, but I don't have the time to step out and breathe fresh air. What's the point?
Mm. That's the
I didn't
point.
come to I didn't come to America to sit in my room and work
Mm.
24/7. I came because I wanted to go out, meet people. If I don't have the time to do that, then what's the point? So
Absolutely.
education abroad is so much to do with learning how to live, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
learning how to
And
meet people and understand cultures and have fun,
mm.
and like find love in friends and
Mm.
family and build your own
Yeah.
connections. And yeah, like, I think like it took me a long time to move on from that
Mm.
race. Like, it's a
Mm.
race, and if you don't run,
Mm.
somebody's going to run over you. How many years of work
Mm.
experience you have? How many extracurriculars have you done? Like, those are like tertiary things, they're not primary.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think, yeah, like they're very limiting beliefs also in a certain sense, because obviously anybody who's from that context and is listening to this, including me, like, I might seem like the biggest rebel and all of that in the way I'm living life, but it is by design, it is by choice, because for I wouldn't say for the longest time, but for some time I did buy into that ideology. And from time to time, here and there, like, it's so funny because just the other day I was like, why do I even have a LinkedIn account? I don't even live that life. And sometimes it's just such a, because I keep seeing jobs, and like there are these headhunters who will keep sending me messages, and I'm not interested, like, no, because and it is such a difficult thing to keep doing also, because looking around you, even if there's so much, it's almost like there's something enticing you, there's something
Yeah.
that yeah, 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 like, but you do that, great, but you're never going to be able to buy that. And that's a lie. That's honestly a lie, because what society tells you is that to have a certain kind of a life, you need XYZ, you need X amount of money. And I would say I'm such a contradiction to that, because no, I don't have that. and yet
Yeah.
this is possible. And I can give you the math of it also, that like this is how it's possible, and this is the risk associated. I'm fucking sitting in Bali, so I shouldn't be complaining. I think it's also a mindset that we need to move on from, and you know
Yeah.
adopt new ways
And
of thinking. And
yeah, and I just wanted to say, I was like, for anyone who listens to this, some it's very important to recognize that tiny minutes of self-doubt are going to come,
mm,
because
mm,
you see somebody post a great job or a car or getting married, or the societal milestones that you should achieve by a certain
mm,
age, um like they're buying their first home. You see those things, and you will question, oh my god, what am I doing with my life? Or am I doing the right thing? Am I capable of doing this? it's
mm.
it's fine to have those moments, because it's very human to have those
Yeah.
moments. But what I love about this ideology, that I think we've co-developed, like I think you and I have had so many conversations about this. I think the ideology that we have co-developed now is that we're so happy for anyone who has achieved that. We're so
Yeah.
happy that you are where you want to be. You have a house, you are getting married, you are getting a great job, you're getting a
Absolutely. Yeah.
promotion. We cheer them on, and
Mm.
we with that also comes the realization that, for me, that's not my
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
you know
Absolutely.
for me, this is my purpose.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
envious of you at all. I
At
am
all.
cheering you
Yeah.
on. We're not in competition. I love you. I'm giving you all the good energy that's possible from my end.
Mm.
For me,
Mm.
I moved on from those milestones. I decided that those were
Mm.
not the milestones I was going to set up for myself.
Mm.
I set them up. They gave me a lot of grief. I let them go. And this is
Yeah.
what my purpose is now. Like, my purpose is
Yeah.
to do research. I'll be 30 when I graduate, 29 when I
Yeah.
graduate. I don't have a problem. Like,
Mm.
this is a great life.
Yeah.
And like, people would see and say, oh, she has a great life. But I have self doubts. Like, people will look at you and say, she has a great life, but you have self doubts. The
Of
same way
course.
that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
probably have self doubts looking at somebody else. But as long as you're on your purpose, and
Mm.
you've moved on, you've tried everything, you're like, no, this is not for
Mm.
me, then you should just know
Mm.
that this is what you chose. It's a life of
Mm.
choice,
Mm.
and you consciously chose to be where you are at. And if you didn't
Mm.
choose this, and you don't love this, then whoever's listening, that's your cue to move on. Like, if this is not
Yes.
a choice that you consciously made,
Absolutely. Yeah.
rather than being a
Mm.
living passively, live actively. Like,
Mm.
actively choose
Mm.
what you want to do. Like, if you're just living
Mm.
passively because, yeah, then that's like you're breathing. When you
Mm.
actively choose, that's when you're actually invested in living your
Yeah.
life. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
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 Yeah, I think it reminds me about one of these conversations way back in the day when we were having, and it was around romantic relationships, and you said this thing about yourself, and I drew some sort of inspiration from that, and I imbibed that because what you said was that I move on like from people or the relationship even before I've broken up or even before I've gotten out of the and I was like, that is such a genius thought. And and I was like, that is fucking genius because believe me, and not in romantic relationships because I don't think I could never, how I am and, like those kind of setups, but everywhere else I've adopted that. Like I was at this corporate, I was like, okay, great, getting a good salary and all of that. Within 3 months, within 6 months, I knew I'm not cut for this. I'm not going to be here in a year. And yet I was like, okay, what is this giving me right now? So Like, you mentioned about that preparedness, that you need some time to dwell. So I think one more thing that comes, and in my situation, and honestly, I don't think this is something exclusive to me. Okay, I think 3 months into a certain place situation, I have this 6 month rule that, within 6 months, you actually break it down into 3 semesters, actually, or, even 2 semesters, and do this check, and you know already if you want to be there or not. All the time, it's not going to be possible to, sort of fight or fly. What is it? Fight or fly.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to stay frozen in the place. And so, what do you do then, and what do you do in that period is so crucial, at least in my experience, about how you sit sort of setting the launch pad, because you're not going to be there. So
Yeah.
that is definitely something that I picked up from you, and I applied it. Had my own spin to it, but it was very inspiring in a certain sense.
It's important, no? Like, think about it. You know, when you're in a situation where you don't want to be, whether it's a relationship or a job, come on, like, you've lived with yourself the longest. Nobody has
Yeah,
lived with you as long as you've lived with yourself.
absolutely.
When, and the reason I say that I move on even before I break up is because of I'm so risk averse, right? Like,
Mm,
I need
mm,
to be 1000% sure that I don't want this. So I
mm.
start the process of telling myself, okay, this is not serving me. This is not working
Yeah,
out for me.
yeah.
Okay, then what am I going to do next? Okay, I'm going to be single for some time. I'm going to do this. I'm going to see this. Okay.
Mm,
If I have not talked myself out of it for 2, 3 months, then I'll break up after 2, 3 months. If I have talked out myself out of that in 2, 3 months, then I'll stay. Then I'll give it another shot. But for me, I need to tell myself and know for myself if I've, and
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, people might think, and for people, that semester that you're talking about, those 6 months,
yeah.
for some people it might be 1 year, because
Mm,
some people, like, they take longer to decide whether they like it, right?
mm,
So that could be one
mm,
year. For some people it could be 2 months. In 2 months, whether this is for you or this is not for you. For me, it's like, I give it time. I give it like a year. Anything I do, I give it a year. So none of my
mm,
relationships are less than a year, which people are
mm,
just like,
mm,
you've dated every boy for a year. And I'm like, yeah. Like,
mm,
none of my relationships are shorter than a year. But like, I
mm.
give it that time, but in like 8 months, I know. So the last 4 months, 3, 4 months is for me to know, okay, am I staying in this, or
Mm.
am I like, this is not working out for me? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, but like
It's
it's a very intelligent strategy, I think, because like you look at it in a very personal relationship sort of view, but like when for me, because we're young, okay, as simple as that, and very practically, I might be the most emotional person, but I'm also very practical. And I would say I'm far more practical than emotional. And I'm already very emotional. So imagine how practical I could get when I need to do that. And I think what happens then is that, and earlier I wouldn't do that by choice or conscious. Of course, it was by choice, but not consciously. And
hmm,
then, what I realized that, I noticed this pattern that I'm not staying anywhere for more than 6 months or 8 months. And these were only professional experiences that I'm talking about. And I was like, okay, what's happening? And then I was like, that's because I understand in the first few, like, and what sort of fed into the imposter syndrome earlier has now become like this superpower of sorts. Even with the business partnership, I knew it's not working from far before. It's just that I didn't have, I wasn't in the correct space of mind, or maybe, like I would have probably dealt with it much earlier. And it did have to do with a lot of overlap of personal loss and professional, like, because professionally it was like on paper, it was not making sense. And, as a business owner, I knew that within 3 months, right? Because there's data and there's numbers, and if that's not talking to you, then you already know. So basically, there's also KPI setting that you need to do for your own self, and that could
Yeah.
be qualitative also. That okay, great, you're making this salary, but are you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Are you appreciated? And do people ask these questions to themselves, or do they even like, because for me it's like it's very intriguing that I'm sure everybody is at some level thought of it. So do you just sort of brush it under the carpet because it's a cultural thing, or yeah, it just sort of makes me wonder that why is that so difficult for like anybody to pinpoint on to start saying that no.
Yeah. No, and I'm thinking about it, and I think like I see both sides to it. See, there's a romanticization of being in something. There's also
Mm.
a romanticization of this vagabond kind of life where like you're going
Mm.
from one country to another, that you don't have roots, and very like for people who watch Bollywood, very very ye jawani hai diwani bunny kind of life where you're like, oh, I'm going from here and here to there. The romanticization should not be of stability or of being dynamic like that. Like it neither should be
Mm.
romanticized. What should be romanticized is exactly what you're asking. Do people ask themselves, are they fulfilled?
Mm.
Is this for
Mm.
me? Is this working for me? That's what's for some people. Like I've always done such long degrees. Like a
Mm.
PhD is 5 years. You have to sit with it, right? You have to do it, and if you're not enjoying it, ask yourself and quit.
Mm.
If you're enjoying it, stay.
Mm.
Both are romantic. Both are
Mm.
amazing. As long as
Mm.
you know, and that is something that I keep thinking about. Like you're right, I don't know if everybody asks themselves, but it's Shreya, it's interesting because I think in South Asian cultures, in a lot of cultures actually, a lot of Western friends of mine too, like in a lot of cultures across the world, that thought was not even a thing until our parents' generation. Am
Mm.
I enjoying this? What are you talking about? Like that's you don't work to enjoy.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, you work to put food on the table and to get like
Mm.
support your family. It's such a duty orientation to stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
it's beautiful. You don't need to enjoy your job. Pick a hobby.
Mm.
You don't need to enjoy your job. But do you enjoy life? Like even if you're not
Mm.
enjoying your job, even with that job, are you doing other things to enjoy life? That was not something that my mom, I don't think she ever asked herself. am i
Yeah.
am I feeling fulfilled? Am I enjoying life? Is this
Mm.
working for me? Is this my purpose? Is am I waking up excited, happy? Every day you can't, but like most days, am I waking up happy, excited about what is going to
Mm.
come? Or am I waking up with dread? It takes me 5
Mm.
minutes to get up from bed because it's like, oh my god,
Mm.
another day. Like is that how I'm living, or am I living mostly like I have a jump in my step about my day? I don't think those questions were even asked. It's a very
Mm.
new millennial thing that we're even starting to do, like to ask those questions. So I don't know if
Mm.
people ask those questions as much, but they should. I think like I didn't, and now I
Mm.
do. And
Yeah.
when I feel like, no, I'm not enjoying this, I speak to people who I need to speak with, and I'm like, okay, I'm
Mm.
taking a break
Mm.
for 5 days and I need to do
Yeah.
something that makes me happy. Sometimes when I'm really
Right.
enjoying this, I don't take breaks for 2 weeks. And I just like, it's like a state of flow. And you're like, you're just
Yeah.
working. And people might call me workaholic, but that's my fun. Like, I enjoy that two
Mm.
weeks of like crazy working and like working hard and working all the time. I'm completely in the zone. So, both ways, I
Yeah.
think the romanticization
Mm.
needs to be of awareness and not of
Yeah.
one way of life or the other. Like, you can have a stable life
Absolutely.
and still be very fulfilled.
I think yeah, like when I've discussed this, I wouldn't say in such open terms with my parents, but so for me personally, there's two sides to it. A, that like I grew up in a household which, after a certain point, it was only my dad who was earning, right? So he was able to provide only because he followed his passion in a certain sense. Okay. So in a way, it is in my DNA, so that obviously adds to my advantage. And that sort of goes into the whole privilege story that, we're able to ask ourselves these questions because, and this is what I tell them in my conversations, that guys, your struggle was different. Your struggle was like, they grew up in poverty. So
Yeah,
their struggle was feeding themselves. Their struggle was not going to sleep hungry.
yeah,
So obviously we're not going to have the same problems, and obviously we're not going to, like it was more necessity. They had to
yeah,
work out of necessity. And it's so interesting because, although I see my dad like this person who, sort of defied convention and went on to, like play cricket to basically put food on our table. And honestly, it was far more comfortable than that. I'll be honest. But the way it was for him, it was like exactly this, that what he was doing was putting food on the table. Like, and that's the way he sees it. He was like, I was never good at studies. I knew I could never get a good job. I knew I could never sort of make it to higher management with my skills and with my degrees. So cricket was the only way. It's amazing that, how the same situation can have two completely different interpretations, which is so closely experienced, right? So
yeah,
I think definitely there is that gap, and it's okay. It's a matter of fact that at their time they had to struggle with that. And anybody who's listening to this, like there's no question of, oh, you can say that because you're privileged. Dude, you're privileged too if you're listening to this, because you're listening to this on a device that allows you to connect, and you're listening to this with an intellect that allows you to enroll into this conversation. Every generation deals with their own sort of struggles of what they need to move on from. That
yeah. It's very interesting. I was just see, even for you and I don't know. I mean, for I couldn't be very esoteric. Like I couldn't be like,
mm,
oh, I want to learn pottery and I want a career in
mm,
pottery. My mother would whack me. She would beat me up if I woke up one morning and I said, "Mummy, I want to do pottery." My mom would be like, "Yeah, get out of my house." Right? Like I couldn't wake up and say I want to do pottery or I want to do flower arrangement. My mom would just break my face. Like I'm not kidding. So I she was far more constrained than I was because she was
yeah.
not allowed to do medicine and she was
Mm,
made to do literature because she was a woman and all that, and my grandparents said I can't pay for like med school and stuff for you, so no. That restriction I didn't have. I could do
mm,
whatever I chose to do. It's a different thing that
right.
I decided to do something in management and do organizational psychology. But I could
Mm.
do whatever I wanted to do in that bound of lucrative careers. If I went and I said pottery, my mom would just not. Like, she would be like,
Yeah,
no, you
not
can't do
vibe,
pottery.
okay.
Yeah. But
Mm,
the next generation will be better than me. Because if they want to do
mm,
pottery, sure. Sure. As long
mm,
as you're excelling at it, you're happy with it, you can support yourself eventually in your life. And with you don't need to make $500,000. You can make enough to pay your bills. And if it fulfills you, go ahead.
yeah,
Please do pottery,
yeah.
do flower arrangement, do like play an instrument and make a career out of that. Nobody's stopping you. So generationally, we also push boundaries, and
Mm,
we push more and more boundaries. So it's on you to like know that okay, this is where they stopped.
mm,
I need to push it a little further and I'll be here. And then my next generation will
mm,
push it a little further. Because we're
yeah.
trying to move on from traditional ideas. We're just a generation that's trying. We're the first ones to from our family to set up base
Mm-hmm.
in a different country. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's like we're
Mm-hmm.
still immigrants. Only my
Mm-hmm.
work keeps me in America, right? Like, why do I put so much value to work? Is because this is not my home. My home was in India. I came here and I'm living here for my work, which is why I'm so attached to my work. But I'm
Right.
trying more and more to move on from that idea that this is not my home. This is the longest
Mm,
I've lived in a place since my hometown. So this
mm,
is my second home, technically. And I have to keep telling myself that and move on from this idea that I'm an immigrant who will have to leave, who I need to leave. No, this is my home.
yeah.
Like your
Mm.
roots won't grow until you let them. You have to give them the soil to grow. So I'm like, this is my home. I'm here. You have to move on from that ideology. Only then will you be able to be free and like let the other
Right.
person, let the next generation, let the next crop of people from your life do what they want to do.
I'll digress a little, but I think freedom, like, when you say be free, I don't think in the kind of societal structure that we live in, it's not possible. Just, simply put that, okay, if tomorrow somebody wants to be a potter, just for example, and you're saying that, like there should be this freedom of choice to be a potter. The only reason they probably wouldn't be able to do that, the only reason I can't be a potter if I want to today is because there is this whole social structure that requires me to pay bills and not do things in barter. You get
Yeah.
what I mean? So like absolute freedom is still something that, like there's no such thing, at least for our generation, there will never like be the kind of freedom. Yes, you can have the freedom to move from place to place and all of that, but I think there's a far, 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 far way to go. Like, and that's what I hope for the next generation that like whatever is man-made in a certain sense that's stopping you from being free, that you can probably remove. And
Yeah.
again, it's very utopian, but let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
I think we should move on from this conversation now. Interestingly, all the conversations that I'm having, they're so difficult to contain in 1 hour, and like it's just that you want to keep discussing it, and it also makes me sort of hopeful that like there is an interest in like talking about these things that matter. Yeah, it's just a small effort to start having those conversations that okay, yeah, like do you think this is an issue? Do you think this is something that we as a generation struggle with? If yes, like yeah, let's just talk about it. And that's why we were here, and that is why you're here and I'm here. And thank you so much for doing this, for agreeing to do this before your lectures or before your day gets on. And
Thank
I
you.
think
No,
for me it's
amazing.
been
I know.
very
I love
insightful,
you.
a lot of fun.
I just wanted to say for me, I love you. And I think that it's so, um, it's such an important thing that in all seriousness, I think conversations are so important because I don't think we
Mm,
had people we heard talking about things like just do what you want, like
mm,
these conversations weren't
mm,
had when we were growing up. So I love that you've
mm,
taken that leap of
mm.
faith to do something that you truly believe in, and I'm so proud of you. And
Yeah.
I hope that people who listen understand and find an interest and find hope in the conversations that you're having with other people and and
Yeah.
and this initiative. Yeah.
And this will find its own like set of even 100 people who find value in this, and out of them, even if one life is changed, then my job here is obviously done, and it is something to account for. So
Yeah.
that is what you have also contributed to by being so open, by being so honest, and being so giving in this conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a
Thank
have a
you.
lovely day.
You too.